Hello and welcome to 365 Days Towards Racial Change. My name is Tomlins Nyback. One second. We're here at day 87, rolling right along. And I want to start. I'm really disappointed in America. This isn't going to be an American rant, but we're just spending too much time. Too many Americans are not paying attention to the changes coming, the changes happening in the world. I believe we're about to be knocked for a serious loop economically and in our labor class. And we just going right along as though our regular jobs are going to sustain us. I'm kind of older, so I'll be on the tail end of a lot of stuff. But a whole lot of Americans are coming into a time that they really need to shore up and pay attention to some of the changes coming in the world. Also, I'm disappointed in our politics. Um, I'm seeing stuff that were just myths and rumors and made good movies from the 60s and whatnot. I'm seeing it being played out here. I probably should stop watching CNN so much. Let's get to our introduction. This is 365 Days Towards Racial Change. We're talking about black issues in America. And as we've gone on into this, we're kind of deep in the waters now. Day 87 seems like we've got a firm commitment to see this through. And two thoughts have emerged that are becoming more solidified and becoming I'm able to articulate them better as the project continues. First thought has two parts. First part is the African slave black mind being passed on from generation to generation. Are we teaching our kids, to be passive and silent, to hope that others rescue us and give us the rights we want and then meet our needs? Is this expectation being passed on from generation to generation? Intuition, genetically, environmentally, succumbing to greater powers by whatever means, is part of the reason the majority of blacks are still in this quagmire stemming from slavery, a result of this prevailing black attitude. Now, my second part of that is does the white privilege work in the same way? And I got to say, like, now, as I've gotten into this project, when I start to really discern, it's like, how did white people they just placed themselves in this position? They're not overly smarter. They're not physically better. I know there's guns and whips and chains and torture and things like that, but I'm scratching my head because what I see is so much inefficiency, ignorance of this group of people in general. And I wonder, that's amazing that there's some statistic. I think it's in one of Dr. Anderson's books about how could people in general with a third grade education have so much power and sway. That's this heavy mental thing going on. So it happened. There's reasons for it. It's not. I'm sure it's not as simple. You know, a lot of things go into it. But how did it happen? Because from where I sit and where I'm at right now, and what I look at when I look at the overarching power and control uh, in my day, it doesn't make sense that white folks should have that much power and control on the earth. They're just not that much smarter, yet they've gotten in position. They put themselves in position. It's incredible. So having said that, continuing getting back on track here, having said that, does that attitude and that position get passed on from generation to generation? Do they just live with the expectation of privilege, power, control? Are they pass that on to uh, their children? Is it intentional how they place themselves? And then my second thought is concern for blacks being financially literate. I'm being educated. Now, I'm not advocating education, like don't go to school to get an education. Education as a school thing, it doesn't give you better access nowadays anyway. I'm sure it did in a way. That's why school and higher education became such an institution. But that is faded out. It's who you know. It's experience. It's getting out there and doing it now, especially in the information age. You can learn uh, high class stuff right here on the internet, over online and whatever. You don't even have to go to classes anymore. So I'm not advocating an education on this vein, but I want blacks to be more financially literate. It was strange when I was in a certain city. I guess I was in my early 30s, very late 20s maybe, and to run into men, black men, only black men, uh, in their late 30s, early 40s, who could not read. I can't imagine. I'd have to be away from writing and books for a very long time to forget how to read. Like, but these guys, they didn't know how to read. They never got that. This failure of education and all that. The point is, they're at the mercy because they can't read. They're at the mercy of the sway of society. Um, anybody, education is important. So now financial literacy, us blacks can complain about being marginalized, bearing dysfunction of the world and of the nation and things like that. Part of our vulnerability lies in our lack of financial literacy. It's not taught in school, and that's by intention. Same as politics. We heard rumors of class presidents and voting, and maybe occasionally a representative from our class in high school went to some meeting. No, we didn't care. We were in high school. We don't care. It was not. It was not a part of what brought meaning to our lives at the time. It was just a show. I'm sure many of the politicians up there in Washington on Capitol Hill, are people who participated vigorously in high school voting and was class presidents and stuff like that, and then they just continue to play the game. So now, because of my political illiteracy, I'm at the mercy of all these people, and for me to begin to foray myself into that arena, it's going to take a lot of energy. So, moving away from that, I feel like a good financial literacy will weather any storm. So I don't have to be a politician or articulate in those arenas to to be successful in life. So I'm concerned. I want blacks to be financially literate. I want us to understand banking terms, assets, liabilities, uh, watch our dollars, where we're spending them, um, knowing how things are being, uh, how money as power is being transferred from one nation to another nation. We got a long way to go. Um, it needs to be taught in the home. It's not going to be taught in school. You know, we need to know our tax dollars. We need to understand why the rich pay little and the poor pay more taxes. Just briefly, the rich pay less because they create jobs and whatnot. The government likes that. The government incentivizes that. It's not even tax brackets or anything like that. It's job creation. It's cooperation with the government. Those individuals who participate properly pay less. Get over it. That's the way it is. Go create, go make a vehicle that creates jobs and things like that, and you'll see. I'm trying to put myself in that position. I'm learning a whole lot, you know. Asset and liability, that's a very easy thing to understand financially. Liabilities take money out of my pocket. Assets put money in. Uh, right now I have a liability column this big. I have an asset column this big, but I've stopped digging and enlarging this column, the liabilities, and I've started my little seeds here. Yeah, I'm decades down the road. I've been lied to. I've made poor decisions and all that. Let's just throw that out the window and start moving in the proper direction. There's a bit used to be into a lot of 12-step self-help circles, and we talk about the person that's walking down the road and they fall in the hole, and they get out and they fall, come down the road and they fall in the hole again, and finally the individual walks around the hole. I don't like that. I like the digging um, illustration. I've been digging the hole. I fell into the hole and I started digging. I finally stopped digging, and now I'm allocating my resources in the proper direction. And those compound if done properly, especially in America. I don't know how it is in other nations, but certain things compound where these little kernels, some little financial seeds that I'm planting today. Give me another 30, 40 years, check back, when I'm really gray. I'm gray now, but I mean, when I'm real gray and stuff. And let's see if I finish well. I'm determined to finish life well, and I want the same thing for you. Oh, let's get to it. I'm inspired by a man named Dr. Claude Anderson. He talks about these issues much better than I. He's all over YouTube. Go to powernomics.com, Heritage Institute. Find him, contact him there if you can. I haven't been able to reach him myself. He's a busy guy. But I read 3 of his books. Very important. Let's start there. So if I ever do meet him, I'll know what I'm talking about. A Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. We're coming out of that text today. I encourage you to get these texts. Black Labor, White Wealth, Search for Power and Economic Justice, and Dr. Anderson's National Plan to Empower Black America. Powernomics. You see behind me, hashtag us too, is Black women. Conversating there, but it's open forum. Don't be shy to go there if you're a guy. Black Enough, BLAGGENUF, kind of a Black Facebook. More people, organizations to hang out with if you are entrepreneurial minded, business minded. Go to theblackbusinessschool.com. Find Dr. Boyce Watkins there. You can get some free trials, and he'll encourage you to try his products there and whatnot. I'm not much of a subscription guy. He does have some things you can buy outright and whatnot, but I encourage you to go because it'll give you a more in-depth perspective. Some of the lectures and whatnot address black issues in business specifically. So I'm not going to talk down about the man, even though I don't use the product. And finally, a fictional account of slave life in America, Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe, and she looks at mid-1800s America, and the impact of slavery, slave life, and how a lot of things, here we go, how a lot of these issues were going on in her day, and how black slaves were treated, how slave masters treated slaves, and life like that. I return to her book, and we have what's called story time every once in a while because her work has influenced theater, myths, and stigmas between whites and blacks in America. It's a very powerful work. When it arrived on the scene, it was the second best-selling book after the Bible. That should show you about how many Americans had access to this. We get blackface from her work, a lot of other things. So as we go on in this year-long project, we check in and see how Tom and other slaves and slave masters are getting along in America there. All right, today like I said, we're coming out of Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. We're on question number 95, page 264. And Dr. Anderson has this interesting, this is going to be a short clip. The notes are even shorter. Have you heard that laziness is a black disease? And, it's, for some appearances, it may look like that, but I remember, I'm coming out of a very long drug and alcohol history, addiction, and stuff like that. I remember early on, I met a guy in the room, it was a white dude actually, and he was talking about how he had heard of all these rumors about people saying how addicts were very lazy and shiftless and stuff. A lot of negative stereotypes you just ascribe to black people, black slaves, like that. He said that's crap. That's bull because he said getting high is hard work. And he is so right. There's the stealing, the lying, evading, ensuring the purity of your drug, or not getting robbed. It's pretty intense, the life of an addict. And he was so right. Now, for the black slave, this black laziness disease, that's gotta be. Like, this was an issue in the mid-1800s as well, and it's comical because this is the group that's building America, that's bearing the heat of the sun, that's probably exposed in the winter if the slave master is not mindful of their care. All these things, the group of people being raped, beaten, castrated, worked to death, lynched, and like this was a real issue back in the mid-1800s. Very interesting. So in this little blurb that Dr. Anderson has, he quotes, he brings light to a physician back in Louisiana named Dr. Cartwright, Samuel Cartwright. And he actually made a report, and it was taken seriously, no doubt. It's called Report on the Diseases and Physical Peculiarities of the Negro Race. So he waxed eloquently and authoritatively about two specific diseases. I'm not going to try to pronounce them because it's a medical term with a lot of Neo-Greek Latinese in there, so I'm not going to try to pronounce the terms. But the first one was, he said he discovered a disease that caused blacks to run away, black slaves to run away. Like he wrote a thing that's a disease that blacks run away. And this other one was the disease that makes blacks lazy, rascally, uppity, backbiting and stuff like that. And I don't know, it's amazing. I mean, you abuse even the most docile animal. You think you abuse them, they're eventually going to run away. That's a rational response in the face of abuse, is to run away. So it's I'm going to say, and the point, one of the points I want you to go away with today, day 87, is how, see, the mid-1800s, you got Uncle Tom's Cabin, Civil War is brewing in there, and it's the height of the white man's ideology, thinking, power, privilege, expectation of favor, entitlement, how they set themselves in this position, and they really deluded themselves into thinking that their skin color made them better, that much better than black folks. To treat this group of black folks anyway, separate their families, degrade them at every turn and every chance they could get. And it's incredible, So and it's they're the ones with the neurosis, the mental illness, to think that they're so much better. They're using all this force and power and whatnot, and so much so that they're emboldened to write papers and have symposiums, no doubt. As though they're studying a type of lesser human being. The same way you would study an owl or a rat or a dog. That's their mindset back there in the mid-1800s, and still today in a lot of ways. But it's the same way you would study and dissect a frog. It is their attitude towards black folks, where they can write papers and sit back and smoke their cigars and feel like they're like so superior. And it's amazing. So this Dr. Cartwright, he's so smart to think that, he's actually unveiling some answers. Oh, and he did have a cure, his antidote for running away slaves and uppityness, laziness of slaves. His cure, very, very comprehensive remedy that he forwarded. I know, I'm just messing with you. But really, his cure was to beat the devil out of the black slaves. That's the cure, you know. You lazy, uppity, running away, slave. Oh boy, that was his answer out of his in-depth research. And, you know, I don't know how long his report was, but, you know, that was his conclusion. Like they're, you know, they've got us penned up like chickens and cows, you know, and horses, and they're studying, you know, wow. You got to embrace how terrible this was. You know, whatever you think the motivations for the Civil War was, there was many, you know, freeing slaves, economics, political power, stuff. We touched on all that so far this year to some degree. Uh, but it was so necessary. I think, fortunately, enough white people, for whatever reason, had to break that up because the country did not want to be for uh, 500 years down the road taking this kind of nonsense seriously and presenting it to the world. You find the world, no matter how a nation is configured, uh, whether it's a theocracy, monarchy, you know, democracy, republic, whatever, the world seems to be going in a certain direction, and you just can't hold on to these human rights violations forever without getting some blowback, you know. And you know, the United States is the nation is the steroids of uh, dysfunction. You know, and when we get it right, we get it right. You know, we can really drive it home. But when we mess up and are too far afield, we're just that much more dangerous as well. You know, remember, we're the nation that dropped bombs, the nuke on the people. You know, we'll go there. Yeah, don't mistake our freedoms and stuff. We're not a passive nation. I think our enemies think we're like pushovers because we're so pampered over here, but it's the nature of the pampering and entitlement that makes us that much more dangerous, you know. So and it's the same. That's what I'm trying to get at with the white folks' entitlement and stuff like that. But, you know, once you start encroaching on that, you see all this activity going on in response and trying to curtail some of these issues. All right, we're near the bottom of our hour here, our time here, not an hour. You wouldn't tolerate an hour. I think a half hour may be too long, but I need to do at least a half hour. That's my personal thing. So these diseases, and well, now I will say this, you know, black folks we're bearing the dysfunction of the world, of the nation. You know, you look at parts of Africa, they're just dumping ammunition, and that's the place where you dump and you do your make money on your weapons. Blood diamonds and all that stuff, if you're familiar with that economics. Drugs in America. Finally, this drug thing has reached the white folks and the opioid issue, and now they're really, you know, they're putting border walls, and you know, they're really doing stuff to curtail the opioid epidemic, you know, because it's affecting a large number of white folks. In the 80s, with crack cocaine and all that came in, they, they made movies. They made better movies about drug trafficking. Yeah. I'm gonna leave it there tonight. Actually, I still work a day job. Get it out of that. I hope sometime in this lifetime. So I overslept, but I think today's discussion is relevant and appropriate. Thanks for spending time with me. I'm Tomlin's Nye back. 365 days towards racial change, day 87. Out of the way. We will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.